Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I haven't posted in a long time, so I hope that this video will help you out. Today I'll be sharing a refutation on one of the most popular lines against the Sicilian defense these days. And this line, most of you may know, is called the Grand Prix attack. And most of you may have played this as beginners or played against it as beginners, as certainly I have. And today I'll be sharing a refutation that I've mostly analyzed by myself, but there should be some other videos or books on this as well. But firstly, let's dive straight in. Here, white plays the move e4, c5, knight c3, knight c6, and f4. Now, this is the Grand Prix attack. And after f4, you should always play the move g6. Now, here is where white starts branching off. White can play knight f3, bishop c4. As we'll see, they will transpose if bishop c4 is played. So let's stick with knight f3 for now. After knight f3, bishop g7. In this position, now white has the real big two moves. The move bishop c4 or bishop b5. So, let's dive on the sideline first. In this case, after bishop g7, white can play the move bishop c4. Now, bishop c4 has the main idea of just keeping the light squared bishop. And in this case, we should completely rebut the bishop on c4 with the move e6, completely blocking it out. And although this may look like the dark squares seem weak, white can't exploit them. After the move e5, black can counterpush with the move d5, forcing the bishop to drop back. And if en passant is played, then after queen takes d6, white's spearhead on e5 is gone, and here black is better with the lead in development. So after the move bishop g7 in this position, bishop c4 also has another backup. After e6, here white plays the move f5. Now what's the main point after f5? After f5 here, black should always recapture with the g pawn. And this might look very counterintuitive at first, but it makes a lot of sense because after white plays the move e takes f5, here black counter pushes with the move d5. And now, as you can see, black's pawn structure is suddenly very straight, and here white's at the disadvantage. So in this position, most strong players in this position will play the move d3. Now this keeps the pawn on e4, so the move d5 can't be played. However, you can still play the move knight e7, now protecting the f5 pawn with a knight. And after castles, bishop g5 should be met with the move h6. And after bishop h4, this move should be met by the move queen c7, just escaping this pin. And after white, and whenever white takes, just recapture with the knight, and you should be fine here. This pawn structure may look ugly at first over here, but black is completely safe. So that's the brief overview on bishop c4. Now let's go on to the main line. And here I would recommend the move knight d4. Now the main idea of the Grand Prix attack is after black plays the move d6. In this case, the move bishop takes c6, b takes c6, d3, knight f6, castles, queen e1, rook b8. As you can see, white is making all of his pieces move to the king side. Queen h4, bishop d7, knight g5, h6, knight f3, c4. And here, c4 can just be met by d takes c4. And if another move is played, such as a5, then you can just play the move h3. And now g4 is coming, white's just going to be crushing the king, and black needs to be extremely careful. Not good. So after bishop e5, here you should play the move knight d4, which is the main line and what most people will recommend. And here, white has a few moves. Bishop c4 is just a transposition of a worse line after this bishop c4. Why is it worse? Because after e6, f5, g takes, e takes, here black can just take with the knight. Black doesn't even need to go into all the d5 complications. So after castles, here is where most books and my line will deviate. Most books here, as black, recommend the move a6. And they say that after bishop d3, d6, knight takes, bishop takes, king h1, and they just end here abruptly saying black is equalized. Now, normally I wouldn't say that black is equalized here. White still has this very strong pawn center. The bishop on d3 will come to e2 or c4 very quickly, and white's still gonna have his kingside attack. So instead, after a6, in this position, after castles, I recommend the move knight takes b5. Now, a lot of books say that this is not a good idea because after the move knight takes b5, a6, knight c3, and all of a sudden white's going to have queen e1, h4, and if you play d6, knight f6, say d6, queen e1, knight f6, queen h4, and here they will still say that black is going to face some bad stuff on the king side. However, after knight takes b5, the move a6 is actually not the good move. The best move in this position is to play the move d5, breaking open the center while the knight's not at c3. The reason why this move works is because of a few moves that black can't play. So here there are three main moves: e5, e takes d5, and d3. Let's cover d3 first. After d3 here, black has a very, very good plan. Play a6, push the knight back to c3. After knight comes to c3, you just snap that knight off the board. Even though your dark square bishop looks it's good, there's an even better plan behind it, because after b takes c3, d takes c4, d takes c4, the queens are off the board. Now we come to this position where black and white have equal material, but white's pawn structure here is just completely busted, and black will have the long-term advantage of pawn structure. So after knight takes d5, d5, here, white also has another move, e5. Now, this move could be extremely strong if you don't know what you're doing as black, but if you do, this isn't strong whatsoever. You can just play the move d4, and after white tries to counteract it with c3, you push a6, push the knight back. After this, you play the move knight h6, covering g4 and f5. And after knight c2, you can just push the knight back. Now, this pawn is very bad as well. And after knight c3 is played, castles and b3, and as you can see, white's not bad here, but black's not worse either, and this position is about equal. However, your opponent as white will most likely be looking for the advantage. So after knight takes b5, d5, e takes d5, here, the first thing you might see is that, oh, it's a free pawn. Well, it's a free pawn if you give your opponent a free queen, so let's not do that. Whoops, my bad. Sorry about that. So we were here. Yeah, back here. So instead of playing queen takes d5, we should play the move a6. And after that, knight c3. And in this position, after knight c3, now you play the move knight f6, and now this pawn is going to be dropping. So firstly, queen d5 does not work because of knight c7. So if the knight retreats to a3, you can play queen takes d5 now. And if you play knight f6 prematurely, before you play the move a6, then now white can suddenly play the move c4, which protects this pawn, and white's going to be up a pawn. And if you try to break open this pawn, then all of a sudden d6 comes, and now white's just better. So in this position, you need to remember to play a6 first, followed by knight f6. And here, your opponents are almost always going to play the move d4. If to play anything else, you just take on d5, and after takes, you have a better position with the bishop pair and a much better lead in development and pawn structure. So after knight c3, knight f6, here, white, your opponents are most likely going to play d4 if they're prepared. And here you will find a very vast calculations problem. But all you need to do is actually just memorize these moves because your opponent's not going to deviate. After knight takes d5, d takes c5, knight takes c3, queen takes d8, king takes d8, b takes c3, bishop takes c3, rook b1. In this position, you're in an endgame. As you could see at first thought, you think, oh, black has a bishop pair. This pawn structure sucks. White's behind development. Black can't possibly be worse here, right? And you'd be right, black isn't worse. But you would be wrong if white was worse, because white is not worse in this position. After move king c7, rook b3, and here, if you just play normally and just play the move bishop g7, after bishop d2, bishop f5, for example, now bishop a5 check comes. And as you will see, the bishop will completely block off the king from the two rooks. If the king steps on any of the back rank squares, say king c8, then white just protects against any threats black has. And this rook can't come to d8. This rook is stuck. And white's just better because this rook is completely out of play. If the king comes to c6, then the move rook b6 can be played. And after king takes c5, rook takes b7. And all of a sudden you see that these pawns are under attack. And the king is on c5. It could easily get mated. And etc, etc. And if you play the move bishop c2, then well, rook c7. Well, rook c7 is not good in this position. Rook c1's better. Pin, win. And now black's just busted. So long story short. So how do you react against this rook b3 move, which will be played, like this position will arise in about 50% of your games against the Grand Prix if you play exactly as how I've taught you so far. And for rook b3, you should play the move bishop f6. It makes more sense to drop the bishop on f6 than to g7 because it blocks the knight more and also protects the weak pawn e7, just in case. So against bishop f6, here bishop d2 is most likely going to be played, threatening the move bishop a5. And here you should play the move bishop e6. Now bishop f5 may have seemed better earlier, but bishop e6 has its own rights. And here's why. After bishop a5 check, here you play the move king b8. And there isn't that much of a difference between king b8 and king b8, except for one key thing, is that after the move white usually plays, rook b6, you can play the move rook c8. And if you had your king on c8, you couldn't play this move. After rook c8, you're attacking c5, and there's no way to defend it other than bishop b4, which would completely bust white's position. So here, white does not defend that pawn, and here white has a way to draw this position on the spot. If your opponent knows what he's doing, he's going to take on e6. And after f takes e6, bishop b6, a5, rook e1. In this position, after you play the move rook c6, this position is about equal despite black being a full exchange up. Reason, this rook on a8 is completely busted. Black's gonna exchange sack, and then this knight will cancel out with this bishop, and the pawns will be even, and it would be a drawn rook endgame. If your opponent does not know about rook takes e6, which is highly likely, they would protect the pawn with bishop b4. Now you push them back with a5. After bishop a3, you just grab the pawn on a2. Your king is completely safe. The bishop can come to d5 anytime to defend. In this position, you're just winning as black. So, after all of that, we go back to the move of king b8. And here, white has two more rook moves. White can either play the move rook a3 or rook bb1. Let's cover rook bb1 first because it's just a 1 second coverage. Take the a2 pawn. Now you're winning. That's all I have to say. And after the rook comes back to b6, you just play the move rook c8 again. And now white's just busted. So that's rook b1 in a long story short. Now we finally come to the hard part. And after rook a3, if you don't know the theory, you're going to be busted. So after rook a3 in this position, you need to play the move b5. And b5 might seem extremely counterintuitive at first because it looks like, oh, c takes b6 is coming, right? So after king b7, and all of a sudden, white's like, oh wait, this is an extra pawn, but it's not an extra pawn. Why? Because this pawn b6 gives the king excellent shelter. The c2 pawn is going to be a big threat. Rooks are coming on c8 and d8. The bishop on a5 is a very bad piece protecting on b6. And black's just better here, although he's down a pawn. He has this amazing bishop pair. Like, look at that. It covers all of these squares over here. Yeah, you can see. So, that's how you play against b5. And if white does not play en passant, there's only one other good move. That's to play c6. And here, you play the move rook c8, forcing c7. And here, just play the exchange sack. After bishop takes, king takes. Now black is up a pawn, but black is down in exchange. But this exchange is completely overweighted by the fact that these two bishops are complete monsters. And white's rook on a3 is, well, a rook on a3 is always a horrible piece, especially with a pawn a2 behind it. So here, black is also not bad. And two bishops against rook and knight, according to some people, is equal. And in this position, it could very well just be equal. So that's how black should react against all of white's attacks on this diagonal. So that's the Grand Prix in a long story. If I talk too fast in this video, which I know because I'm doing this on purpose, then you should probably watch the video one more time. The only reason why I'm doing this is because shortening the time is helping my view count go up. And I'm not saying that this is trying to be bad or anything and my video is low quality. It's just that if you made it to this part of the video, then congratulations. You know everything you need to know to succeed against refuting the Grand Prix. So back to a summary. This position, the starting position, is the beginning of the Sicilian Grand Prix attack. I have just led you through a full refutation against the move bishop b5 and the move bishop c4 and how the pawn structure works. I've also taught you how to react against white's delayed bishop c4 and how knight takes b5 is a better move than a6, although the move a6 is mentioned on most books. Finally, I mentioned the important move order here, and I've told you all the chaos that happens after d4 and all these exchanges and how white has a few rook moves to play in this position. The move rook b6, rook bb1, and rook a3, and I've refuted all three of them for you. So that's how the Grand Prix attack can be refuted. It looks like this looks nothing like the Grand Prix attack, and the only reason why is because you're not letting white have a chance to make it look like it. Why? Again, because black's position is just amazing here, and maybe you can play next time in your games. So I hope that you learned something from this video. If you did, then you can consider subscribing, liking, or commenting, because all of those will be really appreciated as my videos will start to become scarcer. And if you really enjoyed everything, then please even just consider donating to this channel so that I could become more motivated and such. So that's all I have for you guys today. And it might be a short video for you guys if you guys haven't watched that much. But if you've made it here, then it means that you've watched the full video. And I thank you very much for that. So see you next time on my channel. Bye-bye.